Today, looking at the scandal that redemption can be, all because of Easter. An outrageous opportunity for second chances. That's next. Today on Listen Up, Easter. It celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the grave. A fact so important, the entire Christian faith hinges on it. But not everyone believes it. And today, we're putting your questions about Easter to those who study Jesus full-time. And we'll push the limits on how far the forgiveness of Christ should go to grant second chances. You could say that no one needed a second chance more or deserved one less than this man, Joshua Blahey, once a Liberian warlord who admits to murdering thousands during his country's horrific civil war. He claims to have had a Christian conversion and renounced his violent past. We'll explore Joshua's story through the eyes of filmmakers who documented his life. But first, Listen Up's Jackie Habib and Musa Fadul took to the streets to ask people for their thoughts about the meaning of Easter.
Are you familiar with the story of Jesus' death and resurrection?
Yes, I am.
And what do you think of it?
I think that it's a good story. I don't necessarily believe that he rose from the dead and all of that. I think it's more an allegory, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word.
I don't think it's possible for God to die and come back to life.
I don't believe it for a second at all. I think it's definitely all made up. To be honest with you, resurrection and everything like that, absolutely no way.
And we didn't have to stack the deck to look for those doubting answers. They were by far the majority. So helping us explore those doubts, Reverend Ann Jervis, Professor of New Testament Studies at Wycliffe College, and Pastor Bruxy Cavey, the teaching pastor for the Meeting House group of churches. Ann, are you surprised to hear how skeptical people are?
Not at all. I imagine that if I went out and asked a sampling of people, I'd get the same response. I think the church has done a very poor job of explaining what we believe, and Christians have done a very poor job of being all that we've been gifted to be through believing in the resurrection. So I'm not surprised at all.
Okay, Bruxy, why did this complicated ancient story need to get thrown into the human path and still be talked about today? It's such a difficult message. Why was it needed in the human story?
Well, from the human point of view, there's something attractive to the story of rebirth, of second chance, of resurrection, death and resurrection, that there's something more to life, there's something more out there. I think from God's point of view, if you look at the story from his point of view, if you believe in God, it's necessary because it is God taking his message and putting it in the clearest form possible, which in the end isn't a book, it's a human life. He says, this is how much I love you. He wraps his message in flesh, and he shows that he has the power to conquer death, which encourages us to then put our hope in him and say, all right, now there's a guy I can follow.
Okay, but Ann, that's pretty unbelievable. Do you think there's triggers that we could have that make it more believable?
Being a believer in Jesus is not an easy life. So I think perhaps even if people believe that it's the case, making the choice to live that way in a way that reveals God's love to other people through our lives is a hard thing to choose to do.
Okay, Ann and Bruxy, thank you, and stay with us because we'll talk more about the questions. Well, one of the first issues that the Christian gospel teaches is that we actually can be forgiven. And when we come back, we'll put that to a tough test case. A Liberian war criminal who lives as a man forgiven by Christ. That's coming up.